As usual, we start our lesson today by greeting each other by saying hello, everybody. I am happy to be with you again as we begin the second part of our semester. We are still talking about emergency incidents and we are talking about security incident investigation. This is the second part of this section because it was a very long section. So I had to split it into two. We did the first part last weekend, and today we are going to do security incident investigations part two. I am going to start straight away because it is again lengthy. It is 52 slides. So we will move with the speed this time round. I hope you will be able to catch up and understand what we are talking about. We are first going to talk about conducting interviews. Conducting interviews. And one of the main methods of gathering information in an incident investigation is by interviewing people. Interviewing people who were at the incident scene. People who are at the incident scene. And people who have been at an incident scene are called witnesses. People who have been at the incident scene are called witnesses. And remember, even suspects are also people who have been at the scene, and also victims. Interviews should also be conducted with anyone who can give relevant information, even if they were not present. Interviews should be conducted with anyone who can give relevant information, even if they were not present. An example. A supervisor who gave instructions at the start of the shift, a trainer who instructed the worker even a month earlier, or a worker who performs the same job as the injured worker. These are examples of the people who should be interviewed if there is a situation related to an injury, something like that. Information that you gather from interviewing will aid the interviewer in establishing a framework for the overall process. The purpose of the information is to assist the interviewer, you as the interviewer, the investigator, to establish a framework for the overall process. The amount of openness that develops during an interview depends a great deal on the rapport and atmosphere established during the initial contact. So the initial contact is very important. When you start interviewing the person that you are supposed to speak to gather information, the opening, the initial start is very important. That's what we mean to say. Um, there are categories of witnesses. There are several categories of witnesses who could have information helpful to determining the cause of an incident. There is what we call eyewitnesses, those who actually saw the incident happen or were involved in the incident. So eyewitnesses. And then those who came on the scene immediately after the incident, and those who saw events leading to the incident. These are what we call eyewitnesses. Eyewitnesses are those who actually saw the incident happen or were involved in the incident. Those who came on the scene immediately after the incident, and those who saw events leading to the incident. And then those who have information about work, tasks, processes, safety devices in use, materials, equipment, and other conditions involved in the incident. And then consider the expertise, background, credibility of each witness. Consider where they were when the incident occurred. Those are some of the things that you are supposed to consider when you are interviewing eyewitnesses. Eyewitnesses are those who saw exactly what happened. Interview witnesses as soon as possible. This is what you are supposed to consider to obtain untainted version of the story as possible. Witnesses should be interviewed as soon as practicable after the incident. If interviews are to be conducted be way a long time, if it takes a long time before you conduct interviews, then you will not get first-hand information. The story keeps changing. Every minute that passes, the story keeps changing. If witnesses have an opportunity to discuss the event among themselves, individual perceptions may be lost in the normal process of accepting a conscious view where doubt exists about the facts. For this reason, witnesses should be separated as soon as possible. Witnesses should be separated as soon as possible. So whenever you are conducting an interview, if it is at your own organization and there are a few people who are witnesses to whatever happened, you should separate them and interview them as soon as possible. Because the more they talk amongst themselves, the more the version of the story changes. So you may not end up with exactly what happened. So it is important to separate witnesses as soon as possible. It is really cold here at America now. It is very, very cold. However, we continue. So separate witnesses as soon as possible and start the interview process as soon as possible. Individually rather than in a group, preferably at the scene of the incident where it is easier to establish the positions of each person involved and description of the events. If necessary, conduct more detailed interviews later as evidence such as photographs become available. So just remember the first point, that eyewitnesses should be interviewed immediately. And if there are several eyewitnesses, then they should be separated before you start the interview. An option, witnesses' own account of what happened. If witnesses are under stress or you cannot speak to each one immediately, ask each to go into a separate room and write out what they saw happen during the incident in their own words. Interview each witness afterwards. Read each person's statement back and clear up uncertainties. It is a process. To interview witnesses is a process. It is something that I like very much. When I used to work at Tribe Hotel and even when I used to work at Republic of Maldives, I used to really like interviewing people, interrogating people, questioning people to establish facts, to establish the truth. You must be very thorough. You must act within timelines. You must act within timelines because it is a very important part of the investigation process. Interviewing people is a very important part of the investigation process. When you are satisfied that you have all the necessary information, ask each witness to review and sign their statement. Compare your interviews against those of other investigators, such as the police or reporters from the media, if this information is available. So when you are satisfied that you have all the necessary information, ask each witness to review and sign their own statement. And then this method can serve as an effective means for information gathering, since individuals will jot down their own ideas in their own words without influence or interviewer or the witnesses. It does depend on how thorough one is when writing out their story, which will vary from one person to the other. Those are the things that you need to do. You need to ask interview witnesses to write down their version of the story, what they saw happened, how did it happen, when did it happen. And we see here that when people write things down, then they are in a better position to give you the truth of the matter. Also, you have to consider the emotional state of witnesses. Witnesses may be feeling any number of emotions, e.g., anger, sadness, stress, fear, which can hinder the investigation and may adversely affect other persons involved. Be aware of each person's physical and emotional status by the time you are interviewing them. Be aware of each person's physical and emotional state and proceed with empathy and understanding to put each witness at ease. Proceed with empathy and understanding. And then common causes of discomfort include fear, past wrongdoings, concern about releasing information, interviewer not at ease, incomplete knowledge of topic, the interview location, e.g., privacy or lack of thereof. So these are some common causes of discomfort that you should be aware of. For example, they say here the location where you are conducting the interview, it is very important. If it is in a place that is doesn't have any privacy, then you know that you will not be able to get good information from the witnesses. Interview questions, the 5W method. These are the 5W methods. The 5W method uses the questions what, who, where, when, and why or how to find out what happened and determine the causes of the incident. So remember what happened, who was involved in the incident, victim, witness, or supervisor. Where did the incident occur? That is the location. And then when did the incident happen? And then this is what we call the 5 W's: what, who, where, when, why, how. Why and how did the incident happen? Use the 5W method to plan interviews as well as collect and analyze evidence. Use this method. Always consider, remember what, who, where, when is equals to why and how something happened. So always use this 5W5 method when conducting interviews and even interrogations. The opening of the interview. Take the time at the beginning of the interview to put the witness at ease, to begin slowly and to listen closely and carefully. This gives the individual a chance to formulate the story in their own mind and gives you a preview of what they know. Use open-ended questions. While you may want to use yes and no questions to break the ice at the start of the interview, proceed with open-ended questions to obtain each person's version of the incident. Proceed with open-ended questions to obtain each person's version of the incident. And then a series of structured questions may also work, such as tell me about, what did you see here, where were you at that time, explain how this task is done. Those are some of the structured questions that you may ask to obtain answers and information from witnesses. Ask questions to get more information as required. Use visual aids, photographs, sketches, and illustrations to help witnesses recall information and clarify important points. And then consider asking witnesses to draw a sketch. Consider asking witnesses to draw a sketch. So those are some of the questions you should consider asking witnesses. And we have said also drawing a sketch to try to remember how everything looked. Some things, pitfalls to avoid, some things to avoid. Don't ask leading questions, e.g., didn't you think that? Intimidate witnesses, e.g., alarming or discouraging remarks such as, well, that was a stupid thing to do. Interrupt the witness, convey your judgments. Don't. Some of us, when we interview people or when we interview suspects, we get angry at them. We get angry at them. We start to intimidate them. We start to interrupt the witnesses. We start to use discouraging remarks. Should not be the case. Don't form your opinions. Don't tell witnesses that I know, I already know you did it. I already know you know who did it, and you're not refusing to tell me. Do not threaten witnesses. Don't threaten witnesses. Then, taking notes. It is important to document pertinent information from the witness for your own reference. Go over your notes with the witness to ensure they agree with your interpretation. While it is important to take notes, it is equally as important that the note-taking process not interfere with the interview process. So take notes as you interview witnesses. Take notes as you interview witnesses. For further reference, you may need to refer to them. And then also, bear in mind that some people feel nervous whenever investigators take notes, and they may be reluctant to share information. If not taking distracts the witnesses, attend to it after the interview. Use judgment if you are considering the use of a tape recorder, as it tends to impede rather than contribute to information gathering. Tape recorder tends to impede rather than contribute to information gathering. Take note of that. And then also, people are inclined to withhold information for fear of saying the wrong thing, particularly if they know it's being captured word for word on a recording device. If you must use a tape recorder, clarify why you need to use it and how the information will be used. So you must clarify if you intend to use a tape recorder. Let's talk a little bit about dealing with conflicting statements. It is normal for statements to conflict. People see things differently and may remember events differently. Each witness likely saw the incident from a slightly different angle. Opinions and perceptions differ. Avoid accepting opinions as fact until you have all the evidence. Avoid accepting opinions as facts until you have all the evidence. And then ending the interview. You have now interrogated the suspect. Now you have interviewed the witness or the suspect or the victim. How to end the interview. End the interview on a positive note by expressing appreciation to witness and others who aided you in gathering information. Encourage the witness to contact you at a later date should they think of something else. Give credit if an individual's ideas are used later. Reiterate the goal of the investigation, prevention, and what will be done with the information you have gathered. So there is a way you end the interview, and those are some of the points you have to remember during and after the interview. I will take 1 minute break and then we can continue from there. So we have spoken about ending the interview. You have to end the interview on a positive note, appreciate the witness and thank them, and also let them know that if they remember something else in the future regarding the same matter, they should give the information to you. Those are some of the things that you as an investigator, you are supposed to do. And then examination of physical evidence. We are now going to look at examination of physical evidence. As noted under the section, visiting the scene, collecting evidence samples will be one of the first steps in an incident investigation. Once you have collected evidence, you will need to examine it closely in order to draw conclusions about what happened. This is also another very sensitive part of the investigation process, examination of physical evidence. Then this may involve sending the evidence to experts. There are experts who are well qualified in examining in examination of physical evidence. For example, there are document examiners. They are just experts at examining documents to see the authenticity of the document at hand. So this may involve sending the evidence to an expert for analysis, e.g. engineer, health professional, manufacturer. Physical evidence found at the scene is usually more reliable than evidence obtained from your witnesses. Ensure to examine all physical evidence thoroughly, e.g. condition of the equipment. Have equipment tested for malfunction by qualified personnel. Obtain the relevant specifications for the equipment. So examination of physical evidence is very sensitive, and usually it is referred to experts to examine these evidences. Review written documentations, e.g. MSDS manufacturer specs, broken equipment debris, and samples of materials involved may be removed for further analysis by appropriate experts. Make notes which will identify exactly where these items came from. So at your level as a security manager in an organization, or as a security supervisor in an organization, and you are investigating an incident, you may need to examine physical evidence. You may need to examine physical evidence found at the scene so that you are in a better place to conclude the matter in a fair and a good way. Written documentation. An often overlooked source of information can be found in documents such as past incident reports. Claim records, maintenance reports, safety and health committee minutes, formalized safe work procedures, and training records. Any pertinent information should be studied to consider how the information relates to the incident and ultimately to prevent recurrence. Analyzing evidence is also another sensitive part of investigation. Once the evidence has been gathered, you are ready to begin analysis. By this stage, you should know how the incident happened and what the immediate causes were. Use this information to determine why the incident occurred. So analyzing evidence is also another very critical stage of the investigation process, and usually the fundamental causes can be found by simply asking why. To prevent recurrence of similar incidences, you must find all possible answers to this question. Why? Why did this incident happen? It is a very important question to prevent recurrence of similar issues. All causes of an incident must be considered for analysis. Be sure to keep an open mind to all possibilities and seek out all pertinent facts. If there are gaps in your tracing or sequence of events, you will need to fill these gaps by the necessary means, e.g. re-enter viewing witnesses, interviewing witnesses. If this is not possible, you may need to develop best guess scenario can be supported by majority of facts you gathered during your investigation. So it is very, very, very important that you remember you may need to re-interview witnesses to fill the gaps that are missing in the story. Remember, the basis is you are trying to go back and get all facts and get all information related to what happened so that you know why it happened, how it happened, who did it, so that you may be able to conclude by writing security incident report. Um, to find the root cause, write out the events of the incident step by step. Recall the 5 factors identified under incident causation. Consider the sample questions within each of the following factors. These are some of the questions or some of the tasks that you should consider when you are conducting an interview, or when you are conducting an interview for the purposes of finalizing an investigation. So some of the questions, you can read them for yourself and remember to practice how these things should be done. Some of the questions that you should ask are, was a safe work procedure used? Had conditions changed to make the normal procedure unsafe? Were the appropriate tools, materials available? Were they used? Was all of the required personal protective equipment available? Were inherent safety devices, alarms, and other systems in the place? Were all backup safety devices or systems in place? Was the task structured to discourage safe work practices or procedures? These are just some of the questions, some sample of the questions that you should ask. And when you read deeper your notes, you will see that they are very, 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 very important during the whole process. And then also you may ask some questions related to material and equipment. Was there an equipment malfunction or failure? What caused it to fail? Was the material or equipment substandard in the same way? Was personal protective equipment used? Should it have been used? These are also some of the very, very important questions, especially when we are talking about workplace injuries, especially when we are talking about workplace injuries or workplace accidents. These are some of the very, very important questions that you are supposed to remember to ask. Were hazardous substances involved? Were tools, machinery, and equipment being used correctly? Check manufacturer's specification for operating tools, machinery, and equipment, as well as any other applicable standards. Were tools or machinery modified in any way? These are some of the questions that also you should ask when you talk about equipment and materials. And then workers. The factors related to workers include individual expertise, his skills and abilities, as well as one's physical capabilities and emotional state at the time of the incident. Inquiry of a worker is not to place blame, but to uncover the factors they experienced at the time of the incident. So remember that it is never about allocating blame. It is about uncovering factors that they experienced at the time of the incident. And some of the questions you may ask when it comes to workplace accidents: were workers aware of the standards, practices, procedures, or legislation governing the activity? Were workers adequately trained to do the task in the question according to standards, practices, and procedures prescribed? Was training, what training had the worker received? What experience did the worker have to do the task? Was the worker physically capable? Was judgment, health, or ability impaired by any reason? Rushed, stressed, using medication, etc. These are some of the questions that you have to ask, especially when investigating workplace accidents or workplace injuries. Then you also have to talk about something about the management. The employer is responsible for ensuring the safety and health of workers at the workplace and is therefore responsible for the policies, procedures, and rules on the job. The employer. And if you are employed somewhere and you are the security manager or the security officer, you are the one who's covering for the employer. So you must make sure that the work is done correctly. People are trained. The equipments are working well. Everything is happening in the correct way. All safety measures, safety issues have been considered. This includes enforcing the policies, procedures, and rules. Management staff, managers, supervisors, and lead hands, etc., must always be considered in an incident investigation since they are responsible for providing direction and supervision. So you see, if an issue has happened at your workplace, you may need to call the departmental manager and also interview them and find out if it is the responsibility of the manager who failed to guide the employees correctly, or who failed to train the employees correctly, or what were omissions that are place leading to the incident. So you may need to also investigate managers. And then some of the questions here would be, were the hazards which led to this incident known to supervisors? Were standards, practices, and procedures developed and implemented to overcome these hazards? Development of practices and procedures. Were supervisors aware of the standards, practices, procedures, or legislation governing the activity? Were safety and health rules in effect? Were they being enforced? These are some of the questions that you may need to ask also during investigation. Was adequate supervision given? Was regular maintenance of equipment carried out? Were unsafe conditions corrected? Those are further questions. Then we also talk about the environment. We are discussing factors that lead to accidents and then injuries at the workplace or incidences, and then calls for investigation, which then calls for investigation. And these are some of the factors. So environment is also one factor that leads to these issues. The physical environment, and particularly sudden changes to that environment, are factors which need to be identified. It is important to note the situation at the time of the incident. What were the weather conditions? Was it too hot or too cold? Was noise a problem? Was there adequate light? Were toxic gases, dust, fumes present? Those are some of the questions you may need to ask as it relates to the environment. And then we go to the final stage where we say preparing the report. The intent of the report is to effect change. If after an investigation there are no recommendations or actions taken to improve the safety and health at the workplace, it is likely incidents will continue to happen and workers will feel a sense of irresponsibility on the part of employer and safety and healthy committee. So report writing is very important. Report writing is very, very important. I encourage you as security professionals to carefully upgrade your standards in report writing. And you can only upgrade your standards in report writing if you are practicing how to write reports. Your reports must be on point with good English, no mistakes. It must not contain any biasing and any judgments that are incorrect. Your reports must be able to stand the test of time because it involves workers' um, contracts. It involves whether people will continue working for the same organization or not. It involves whether we are able to prevent such incidents happening again in the future, recurrence. So reports are very, very important. Reports are very, very important because some issues end up in court of law, and if there is no background report covering that matter, then it becomes a big challenge to the organization. A report format. Report format. We are going to look briefly at a report format. Let's talk about briefly about a report. The report format. We say part one, particulars that you have to consider. Injured party information, where and when the incident occurred, damaged property material information, first aid response. Those are some of the particulars in part one of the report that you need to write. And then also part two, description of the incident, a description of what happened in detail. And then part three, evidence, a sketch of the incident scene, photographs, diagrams, and physical evidence, persons with information and statements. Remember, every organization has got its own way of writing reports. So you have to familiarize with how reports are written at your organization. And you can easily get this information by reading previous reports. So every organization has got its own format or its own way compiling reports. You have to familiarize with your particular organization. And then part four, incident causation, direct and indirect causes of the incident, 5-factor analysis. And then part 5, corrective action taken, immediate and long-term corrective actions, and target completion dates. These are some of the information you have to put into the report, as in part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. And then also part 5, part 6, report review. Who prepared the report and when it was prepared. Report distribution list, signatures of safety and health committee co-chairs, etc. Those are some of the things you have to consider when you are finalizing the report. And then briefly discuss the report, maybe with your manager or with your fellow security officers, to ensure that each conclusion and recommendation is supported by evidence. Discuss the report with your fellows before you submit it. And then finally, where the investigators has used the best guess scenario to fill in the gaps, be prepared to offer reasons why those conclusions were drawn. Consider things the committee can do. The incident may point to weaknesses in activities of the committee. And then finalize the report. This is the last stage. If necessary, the report should be worked to deal with the concerns of committee members. When the committee is satisfied with the final version of the report, both co-chairpersons should sign it. It should then be sent to the employer for corrective action. The committee should assign members to follow up. This is the work of the Occupational Health and Safety Committee. And then finally, what action should the employer take? The report should also consider the employer has a duty to promptly respond to the report and advise the committee in writing of remedial actions. The committee should list these corrective measures and follow up on them. A summary of the incident report should be posted in the workplace for the information of workers. A copy of the report should also be kept in the committee's files and available to be requested for by the Workplace Safety and Health Division. Note, names of individuals involved in the incident should be omitted from this version. The version that is to be kept and filed so that if it is required by the Workplace Safety and Health Division or the government, then names of individuals involved in the incident should be omitted from that version. You have seen that as we have been talking about this investigation, we have been referring mostly to incidences that occur at the workplace related to safety, related to occupational health and safety. And at all organizations, it is a requirement that there is an occupational health and safety committee that deals with these issues. So follow up at your workplace to establish if the committee exists. Again, when something happens, it will usually end up at the security office. And when it ends up at the security office, it is the responsibility of the security office to investigate. Please keep timelines. I have seen in some organizations reports have not been submitted for an incident that happened 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago because the people are not working on the reports. Report writing is very important. Investigation reports must be completed on time and they must be submitted on time. Please follow the guidelines that we have discussed here and also read in detail your notes as we move ahead. This was a lengthy topic and I tried my level best to be very fast, to move very fast. So go back to your workplaces, establish if there is an occupational health and safety committee, and also very important, find out the format that is used for compiling investigation reports. What is the format at your organization? Thank you very much. We will meet again for the next lesson as we continue with our course. Thank you.